They were the heroes from the future. Teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now, you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
This week on the Legion Clubhouse, let's haze the new guy. Superboy number 218, The Secret Villain the World Never Knew. Published July 1976. Written by Cary Bates with art by Mike Grell. The newest Legionnaire may fall in his very first mission. Welcome to the Legion Clubhouse. I'm Steven Schleicher. Here's Matthew Peterson. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
This week we have a new secret villain harassing the Legion members. I think his name is
Zardoz.
No,
like the Sean Connery movie.
It's Soras is his name.
Oh, I know him. Yeah, he pays progressives.
You know, Soras, the guy that has harassed the Legion of Superheroes for years now. He's back. He's back again to harass the Legion members, and he knows all their secrets, which means the new guy, Tyrock, by the way, for those of you who paid attention last episode, Tyrock is the only one who can take down Soras.
Yep. Stop saying it like that.
No, because he really is. I mean, by the end, when the end reveal of who it is, no, it's pretty appropriate, I think. So here's the thing.
Yes.
If the cover of this issue doesn't give it away, the first page, which is essentially a reprint of the cover, should give it away. And when I read that splash page, I'm like, oh, they're playing a joke on the new guy.
Yep.
Which is fine, because, I mean, they did that to Superboy. They've done it to some of the other ones, but you're also doing it on the new guy who happens to be black, and you didn't do it to any of the other recent Legion members.
Yeah, there's quite a few guys. Shadow Lass just showed up. Timberwolf and Chemical King just showed up. I mean, it's nice. I really like this plot, kind of flashing back to the
hazing on
Legions.
You like the hazing incidents?
Conceptually, I like the idea of young kids hazing the new guy and having some fun, because it reminds me of the Silver Age Legion, where this happened all the time. The very first Legion story was essentially this plot.
Yeah, it was a hazing incident.
The new guy's coming in. We're going to give the new guy some static, and then he joins us. And once he's had his rash, he's one of us. And it's fine. But I agree with you. The timing is bad because we haven't seen this in probably like 10 years worth of Legion stories.
Yeah.
Probably, I want to say the last time we saw anything like this would have been before Karate Kid joined, because Karate Kid and those four guys just showed up and they're like, hey, we want to join the Legion. Okay.
So how is Soraz defeating all of the Legion members?
Zoraz. Well, this is important. A couple of months ago, you remember several issues ago when we met Pharaoh Lad 2.
Yes. And also, who was the other one?
Invisible Kid 2.
Yeah, Invisible Kid 2. That's right.
The exploding clones of Lyle Norg and Andrew Nolan were drawn from the Legionnaire's chromosomal cell bank, where they have the cells of all the Legion of Superheroes members, including their powers.
Yeah, in case they need to regrow them.
Right. Zoraz just waltzed into Legion headquarters one day, walked to that secret card catalog of genetic information, rifled through it like John Bender in The Breakfast Club, took out everything he wanted, and now is using that information to give him the power to neutralize, or in this case, actually perfectly counter any Legionnaire's power. So, Colossal Boy tries to grow large. He grows out of control. Light Lass tries to make things light. She flies away. It's all a thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's countering, because the opposite of being light would be heavy, right? But instead he, cranks their powers up out of control to where Light Lass is like, oh, I can't control my light powers. I have hit the ceiling.
Right.
And Colossal Boy is like, whoa, I can't control my growing powers. I have hit the ceiling.
Everybody else also hits the ceiling, but they do it in different ways. Sun Boy is like, oh, I can't control the sun.
Yeah, so we come to find out, initially, at the end of it all, that Soras is either Sun Boy or Superboy, depending on which one they needed to have wear the rubber costume to freak out our young friend Tyrock.
Mm-hmm.
But then we find out later at the end that the third time that Soras shows up is because It just so happens to be another Legion reject.
Yes, the worst Legion reject of them all.
Well, but so
Niedrig, Absorbency Boy.
Absorbency Boy. I mean, this is the paper towel cover poster child, is what he should be, Absorbency Boy. And the reason why we're saying that he's so bad is because right now he's showing up as Absorbency Lad.
Right.
But he's going to come back later as like every Proud Boy's wet dream.
Yes, he eventually comes back as Earthman, who is overtly fascist and xenophobic and hateful and literally maims, and I don't remember if he killed for good, but tries to kill Legionnaires. But that doesn't happen for like 30 years, so that's going to be at least 700 episodes.
Isn't it weird, though, that then in the case of Earthman, a.k.a. Absorbency Boy, a.k.a. Sorass, that the first time that he goes up against the Legion, he's going up against a black man? Isn't that almost, on the nose a little bit too much?
Kind of. I don't know. I honestly wonder if this first appearance fighting Tyrock is why they turned him into a human supremacist jackwagon. I mean, you can read this story as he, hates the Legion, but he also takes special time out and gets beaten down by Tyrock, not just with his sonic powers, but with a karate chop in the neck, and it really looks painful.
Yeah.
The ultrasonic power cry and then kerchunk. I think that it's possible that that's the thought process behind turning him into this xenophobe, which is, just the 30th century way of saying he's a racist jerk.
Yeah. I just find that really fascinating as we look at this. But there are also two other Legion rejects here. The first one is Quake Boy.
Quake Kid.
Oh, sorry, Quake Kid. He's the one that is sitting there trying to. His superpower is warm oats and honey. He's got that weird haircut.
No, you're thinking of Quisp.
Oh, okay.
Quake has a propeller on his head, and he talks like this. No, he has the ability theoretically to create earthquakes, but.
And he's never seen again, though, right? After this, we don't see him come back as like fascist sidekick lad or anything like that.
Nope. Quake Kid has never returned. And the reason why is the other Legion reject coming back for her second round of humiliation.
Right.
Druracept, Infectious Lass, who makes him really sick by forgetting to turn off her superpowers. And then Quake Kid walks away going, "Oh, I'm so sick." And he's never heard from again.
So I'm curious. I didn't know. I know we've had like rich kids get rejected, but I didn't know that you could try out multiple times once you were rejected from the Legion of Superheroes, which makes me wonder why Infectious Lass, of all the people that you're going to have show up, why her?
Well, she says in this story that she found a way to make her powers even stronger.
Ah, okay.
She can cause the E word that we don't say in our current climate. No.
Ebola?
The other E word.
Icky?
No.
Ew?
The one that rhymes with schmepidemic.
Pandemic? That doesn't start with an E.
She has now juiced her powers to where she can literally create epidemics with her own two hands. And there's a story that I don't know if we'll actually do because it's not a Legion tale, but she meets Ambush Bug and says, "I make people sick." And his response is, "Yeah, sweetie, I'm sure you do." But yes, she makes Quake Kid really sick, and he's never seen from again. And I really think that he just walks off stage and collapses.
Well, it's kind of almost serves him right. It kind of serves him right because as the three of them are coming out going, "Oh, here we are, rejected again," Quake Kid is like, "Hey, baby, I know something that'll help us get over this disappointment." And he grabs her, and she's and at first it's like she's wanting to go along with it. And then he's like, "Oh my God, I'm sick." And she's like, "Oh, I guess I forgot to turn off my powers when you grabbed me and I didn't approve."
That is one read on it.
I mean, that's how I read it, is that he was like, "Hey, I know something that'll change our attitudes."
Hey,
I mean,
let's take my retro jetter and we can commiserate together.
Yeah, except for the drippy costume effects that Infectious Lass already has. She's not a horrible looking person, right? Because I mean, you could, hey, What are we going to do for somebody that has bouncing powers? Let's make him fat. What are we going to do with a girl called Snot Girl? Oh, let's make sure that she's got snot always coming out her nose. What are we going to do with Infectious Lass? How about we have some droopy, snotty-looking clothes hanging off of her? But as she is, she's not somebody that I think you would look at and be instantly turned off. It's only when you touch her without permission that you're going to catch the Ebolas and you're going to die.
Well, I've always found when I was younger, I actually thought that she had butterfly wings, and I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, so did I.
And when she finally appeared, and it was clear that Cockrum was drawing her as having phlegmy mucus from her arms, I'm like, ew, and also clever.
Yeah, no.
But mostly
when I first saw it, I thought it was a slime mold that was dripping off of her. For whatever reason. So no, I can totally understand that. It's funny you don't want to say pandemic or epidemic in this episode, Matthew, because there are a couple of other things that tie this issue into current day happenings. And one of those just happens to be the fact that this issue feels really kind of short.
It does. And there's actually a reason for that. I went back over the last few issues and verified, because of a paper shortage in 1973, DC had made their books shorter and shorter and shorter. They went, I think, from 32 pages to 24. This issue is 18. Now, we've been 18 for a couple of months now. I think 216, 217 are both 18-page issues.
Yeah.
But this feels really slight, even for an 18-pager. And I started trying to figure out, well, when did this happen? Because my first thought was, oh, this is the first 18-page issue. Turns out, no. The 18-pager started earlier in 1976. We're now coming out of that paper shortage a little bit into a point where the editor-in-chief, Carmine Infantino, is going to start expanding the DC line of comics.
Yes, as we talk about the DC explosion and then the DC implosion.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll actually get there pretty quickly.
Here's the funny thing about this. So this paper shortage that Matthew is talking about, there's 2 points of origin for this. The first one is in 1973, the Canadian paper mills went on a strike, and they ended up charging almost twice as much for paper than what it had been during the non-strike period. And so this forced publishers to either decrease the amount of pages that they had or pay an outrageous price, which, hurt books, hurt newspapers, hurt comic books. But the other thing that happened in 1973, which as I was reading about the paper shortages of the 1970s, really seemed somewhat familiar. Imagine, if you will, Matthew, you're sitting down to watch The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and Johnny Carson just, jokingly makes a passing reference to, this is going to mean that there's going to be a shortage of toilet paper. And he's saying it as a complete joke. And do you know what happened? For the next year, there was a toilet paper shortage in 1973 to 1974 because of a joke that Johnny Carson made about, the toilet paper being in short supply now.
And the thing that's interesting about this is it's actually partially confirmed by Snopes. If you look this up, Johnny made a joke about a real toilet paper shortage, or about the possibility of a toilet paper shortage. Yeah, he was just
making it up. It was a total make-up thing. There was not a toilet paper shortage until Johnny Carson made a joke of it, and then suddenly the next day, people start having a run on toilet paper, metaphorically. The other thing that I find...
You had to do it.
The other thing that I find super fascinating in how this issue ties with modern day, not only do we have Infectious Lass, making people sick, not only do we have Absorbency Boy getting the prequel to bad xenophobia that runs rampant, not only do we have a toilet paper shortage, but also in 1973, we have, and this lasted for a couple of years, the OPEC Oil Crisis, which caused the stock market to tumble over the course of 73 to 74, a huge amount. And over the last 4 months, we have seen all four of these things that this issue, that was happening in 73 through 76. All these things are super relevant to what's going on today. I know that this issue didn't come out in 73, but just the fact that Matthew brought up the paper shortage and me going, oh, yeah, there was something about that. I remembered it. And then went back and found out that it kind of started both as a Johnny Carson joke as well as the Canadian paper mills going on strike that led to this reduction in pages, but also drop in the economy thanks to the OPEC crisis, as well as, all these other things that were going on. I just couldn't pass up talking about it.
Oh, absolutely. And there's one other thing about this issue that is important in a historical, broader sense.
Is it the point where they call out in an editor's box, decibels are a measure of sound levels, kids?
No, that's just a cool flash fact. This is, to my reckoning, the first Legion of Superhero stories I ever read.
Oh, really? Okay. So in 1976, or are you reading an older issue, or you found this in a back issue bin?
I'm reading back issues. I started reading
This is when your cousin Stork or whatever was telling you can't read these things?
My cousin Elwood, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Was his father.
Stork.
But no, Stork was my friend in high school.
Oh, okay.
He was the one who had the car that accidentally, and never mind, we'll go over it. But anyway, yes, I bought this as a back issue in either probably 82 or 83. And it really did give me a skewed view of what the Legion should be like. Because I didn't really get into the Legion until a year or two later when they started doing the reprints in Adventure Comics after Adventure went digest sized. And I could buy those at the local Bogart's grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first issue. I picked it up as a back issue in Pat's Book Nook. It had been a stripped comic, so it had no actual...
No cover?
Well, it had a cover. It had no logo.
Oh,
so
okay.
The top third of the cover was gone. And it gave me a weird idea of what the Legion was like. This and the tabloid, which my cousin had, both feature Tyrock.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I was like, man, that Tyrock, how long was he a Legionnaire? Because he was in both of the first stories that I ever read. Turns out the answer is about 8.5 minutes.
About 2 issues.
Yeah, but the thing that I really find fascinating about this issue is even though people will badmouth and we have badmouthed the concept of Tyrock, I remember this as being a really good, really exciting issue. And for years, a lot of my characters, because of Zoraz in this issue, and also Hawkman, had big wings on the side of their hats.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, that's historically important. Also, something interesting, the Legionnaires are intentionally setting up to scam their new guy and to mess with his head.
Yes. So
Tom, Starboy, and Dream Girl start making out in front of a monitor.
Yeah, I don't know what was up with that. I didn't see that as part of the gag or the joke. I just saw this as, hey, here are 2 Legionnaires showing their affections for one another, and Cosmic Boy is watching them on the monitor.
It's actually the reaction of Sunboy that I find more interesting, because Sunboy's like, hey, 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 hey. And this is, I think, the first time in my memory that we've seen Sunboy being, I'm going to be nice and say, somewhat lascivious. It actually becomes a very central part of his character in the later 70s and 80s.
Like he's a big cad?
He's a big cad. He's a horn dog. Mm-hmm. He's a serial monogamist.
Kind of like Quake Kid.
Yeah. Actually, the portrayal of Quake Kid in this issue does resemble what later happens with Sunboy.
Mm-hmm.
Sunboy actually becomes something of a playa, and this is, to my knowledge, in 1976, the beginning of that, which is probably not the best thing because it's kind of awful.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, we've talked about this before in the time period where we have the idea of free love and open relationships, that you could have a character that is being portrayed that way. Whether it's being portrayed in a positive light or a negative light, we will have to wait for a future issue to find out. Many people. So going back to what you said a few minutes ago, Matthew, I want to talk about the stripping of the covers. So back in the days when comic books were returnable, it was too expensive to ship the entire comic back. It would have cost, the distributors and the store owners way too much, the grocery store and the drugstore owners way too much money to do this. And so there was this policy that if you ripped off the entire front cover and just mailed back the covers, and with the promise that you would pulp the rest, meaning to destroy them, then you would get credit or you would get money back for every cover that you sold. Then that became almost too expensive to do because of the number of covers that were being shipped back. And so then they said, all you have to do is tear off the logo and send that logo part back, which meant that, either the top half or the top third or the top quarter of your cover would be sent back to the comic book publisher, and then they would give the store credit or give them money back. Unfortunately, or fortunately, and I say, unfortunately, there were people who were scrupulous or had, few scruples. They were trying to get some more ruples, I think is what they were trying to get. They ended up tearing the covers off and then turning around and selling at a cheap discount the coverless comics. And I say that is really a bad thing, but the upshot was, out of all of this is where the start of comic book stores start to come in, the direct market, because kids would go and buy these things and then they would sell them secondhand to kids around the neighborhood for an even cheaper price and make a profit on that. The other thing is we actually save a bunch of these comics over time because they may have just been destroyed otherwise. And so we still have a record of a lot of these comics that are around. I remember the very first batch of DC comics that I read, which were 70s comics. Somebody had given my mom, she was a teacher, a second grade teacher. Somebody had given her a big box of coverless comics. And this included, Justice League, Super Friends, Dennis the Menace, just a bunch of, random comic books. All pretty good, but they all did not have covers. And the whole point that they'd given them to my mom is so she could use them in art projects, cut them up and do crazy things with them, that kind of stuff. But I remember going through this big box. It must have been about 100 comics back in the late 70s, early 80s. And just going into this and going, wow, this is fascinating. I have no idea what's going on in these superhero comics, but man, these are cool. And then my mom took them back because they needed to cut them up for decoupage. So there you go.
Interesting. If you look inside, right next to the indicia on the first page of this story, you will see DC is aware that this is happening because they have added to each comic a note that says this book is not to be sold or distributed with any part of its cover or markings removed, nor in a mutilated condition. So they're basically saying that when you bought those, I usually got them either in big boxes or the 3 for $1, or, it was $1 then. It may have been 10 cents when the comics were 12, but you would get to a point where you'd be like, oh, they've gotten their credit back for the comic. So now they're going to sell you 3 or 4 of them for the price of one. You get comics, they get pure money. Profit. And, the whole thing is actually a crime.
Also, last episode, I talked about how awful it was that they kept saying, yes, we've got blue and green and yellow members. They did it again this issue. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Little didn't learn the first time, although it doesn't appear that anybody complained about that. The final thing that I want to point out in this issue and how it ties back to today, if you look at the very final panel of this issue, as they're formally inducting Tyrock into the Legion of Superheroes, please notice that all of the members are keeping a minimum of 6 feet apart from one another.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/major spoilers.
Oh boy, Matthew, that Cosmic Boy costume. Who boy?
Oh, wow. The letters page of Superboy 218 is all about new costumes for Cosmic and Colossal Boys. And even though the editor says most people liked it, I don't think so. Maria Munns from La Mesa, California says, and I quote, not only do they look awful, they also stink.
Yeah.
Now,
Katie,
I don't know what that means, but it's not good.
Katie wrote in and said, what's holding Cosmic Boy's new costume up? Is it glue? Prayer? Cosmic Boy looks like one of those overdeveloped muscle men, and Colossal Boy looks top-heavy without his tights. Please change them back the way they were. So, yeah, there were a lot of people who were not happy with these covers, or with these costumes.
Yep.
Some people were, though, right? Some people thought that they were okay.
Yeah, I mean...
Here's this one guy. Here's this one guy, JCH, who says the high point was Cosmic Boy's new costume, and it's terrific. Don't let anyone tell you that such a skimpy outfit is either degrading or beneath the dignity of a Legionnaire. It's just fine. Who designed it, Mike Grell?
It's just fine. Now, important safety tip. JCH is actually Jack C. Harris, the assistant editor. That was a comment from Scott Gibson, Evergreen, Colorado. If you're listening, Scott, it's time to call us. You have 20 minutes for your long-distance dedication and a $5 credit to the salon of your choice. Only usable between 7:55 and 8:55 p.m. on 5/12/2021. So go.
Yeah. The other thing that they pointed out in here in this letters column for 218 was how much they missed the Fatal Five.
Yes.
So here's this. Barry writes in his totally surprising appearance of the Emerald Empress in the shorter story of issue 215 made me realize how thirsty, how hungry, and even how starving I am for a new story of the fantastic Fatal Five. How about it?
How about it?
I'm a little concerned that Barry's thirsty for some Emerald Empress.
Well, it didn't mean the same thing back in the 70s.
I bet it did. Superboy, number 219. The Plunder Ploy of the Fatal Five, published in September 1976, written by Jim Shooter with art by Mike Grell. The Return of the Fatal Five and a Stolen Planet. Speaking of the Fatal Five, Matthew, Superboy issue 219 features the Plunder Ploy of the Fatal Five.
I know. I had Plunder Ploy in high school, and I had to stay home for like a month, and I had to take these special pills.
Yeah, my parents went to Hawaii and brought me back some Plunder Ploy.
Right? It's good stuff.
So we get to get introduced once again to Duplicate Boy. You know, Duplicate Boy. Everybody remembers Duplicate Boy, right?
Well, if you don't remember him, I mean, it's probably not without reason. Duplicate Boy's last meaningful appearance in the Legion, I looked it up, Action Comics 381, which this book came out in September of 1976.
Yep.
Previous appearance was October of 69, so it's been 7 years.
Wow. Now, wait a minute. Yeah. He was in Superboy 200, though, right? I thought?
He was there with he was in a cameo. He was standing next to Shrinking Violet
during the wedding scene?
Wedding scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, Duplicate Boy? When did they hire Duplicate Boy? And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Duplicate Boy. I seem to remember him. He had a real interesting name thing going on with him.
He did. His name has actually changed several times already. Initially, I believe his name was given as Ord Quelu.
Yeah.
Later, it became Quelu Ord, at which point the editors decided, and they said that on planet Lalor, from which he hails, first and last names are interchangeable. So you can be Quelu Ord or Ord Quelu. You could be Schleicher Stephen, or you can be Stephen Schleicher. But this issue, Violet says, hey, Qued. And then you get the little box that says Qued Orlu, Duplicate Boy, is a hero of the planet Lalor. So I think that Lalor, as it sounds, is actually a planet of anagrams. As long as all the letters are in there,
maybe
you can do whatever you want with your name.
This is a really weird story. I really have to admit, because Shrinking Violet is really excited that she and Quaalude get to go on a mini vacation together. And when I say a mini vacation together, I literally mean a mini vacation. Some hotel lobby somewhere, like, you know, the Best Western 7-Eleven has built out a scale model of some fantasy city that's just laid out there. And apparently it's got electricity and everything running through it. And so these two think it would be a great idea to go on vacation in this little miniature model that someone has sitting in the lobby of their hotel.
Sure, it's Legoland, literally.
I guess that's the only thing that I can think of. So these two shrink down, and no sooner do they shrink down than there is who is it? Thayrock Johnson is there, or is it
Thayrock Johnson?
Yeah, Thayrock Johnson
is the Persuader.
There. Oh, the Persuader.
And
yeah,
Validus.
Yeah, the Persuader. Somehow these guys got shrank down. We'll find out more about that in a moment. He uses his atomic axe and he slices Duplicate Boy in two.
Well, he doesn't slice him in two, but he injures him very gravely. He slashes him across the back.
Oh no!
And leaves him badly injured.
But it's the atomic axe. This thing should have just cleaved him in two.
Keep in mind, Duplicate Boy can duplicate powers. So at the time that he was being attacked, he was trying to duplicate Validus's power. And part of Validus's power is durability and nigh invulnerability. So even though he couldn't duplicate it and he was dealing with a power feedback from Validus, he clearly had enough durability left over to keep him from dying. That's my official explanation. I'll expect my no prize, even though it's the wrong country, wrong company, and wrong actual, genre, but it's cool.
Meanwhile, we find out that the Emerald Eye of Ekron is suddenly starting to get a power boost. We've seen it bring somebody back from the dead. I think we've seen it do some mind control stuff. And in this issue, we find out that the Emerald Eye, which I don't know if it's at this point called the Emerald Eye of Ekron or if it's just known as the Emerald Eye. The Emerald Eye has the ability to not only shrink somebody down to size and regrow them, it also has the ability to teleport them, leading me to believe that of all the members, and I thought this even when I was reading the Legion hardcore in the 90s, I always thought the Emerald Empress was the most powerful of the Fatal Five, even though Tharok is sitting that he is the most powerful, and Manos Hands of Fate is sitting there thinking that he's the most powerful.
Right.
I always thought
Validus, the Fresh Maker, is just
and I always thought that the Emerald Empress was the most powerful member of the team and always the leader. Here, I think we're starting to see that happen as the Emerald Eye starts to power up.
It's interesting to me that she is probably the best one of them because she's the only one that we don't have a snotty nickname for.
That's true. So with Duplicate Boy in suspended animation, they decide that they're going to go after the Fatal Five. And
Duplicate Boy is in the back to tank,
yes,
just kind of floating there.
Yes. So we find out that the Fatal Five have been stealing things from all over the place. They've been stealing tiny android parts. They've been stealing some microcircuits from Imsk, some android parts from Rorel, some poisons from Zephyro, and they also stole half of a planet, Cryum.
The left half of planet Cryum.
Literally the left half.
The cry part.
Yes, the cry part. And they're trying to figure out, why would these guys need all of these things? Why would, we need poison, all this poison? Well, just so happens that Manos comes from a planet of poison. You breathe poison, and you've got the Persuader who loves to fish, and so you steal half of Cryum, which contained all the wild fish population, and you start to figure out very quickly what these guys are doing is actually building a new secret base.
Yes, and it's pretty smart the way they do it, because it doesn't make sense until you realize all of the parts. And Tharok actually hides their base behind a moon in a stationary orbit. So even if you're on planet Cyrum, you won't see them there. They're always going to be shielded from any planetary defenses.
Yeah, because
it's actually pretty clever.
Because that portion of the planet has now been ripped away by Validus.
Validus, who, by the way, speaks again in this issue.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because I find that really, really odd that Validus is able to speak, and he does so just with it's very casual, which I find odd because
I'm stealing this hemisphere. Get out. Because
they still make him come off as a great big baby with his big rattle that he's got, and yet he's talking just like no big deal. And I was like, what is going on here?
I'm not entirely sure, because if you look at the greater picture of Validus' stories, the implication is that Validus has the intellect of a child.
Yeah.
Validus, and the reason for that is eventually revealed that he is a child. Spoilers! But we'll get there. It's interesting to see him speaking in complete sentences here. I can't remember, and I didn't find any, and I didn't go through every single issue he appeared in, but I didn't find any previous expectations or any previous incidences of him speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and I looked around, and I did the hardcore stuff. I entered "Can Validus speak" into a Google search.
Yeah, and so you ended up on Pornhub or something.
The answer that came up has never actually. First of all, apparently there's a character named Validus in a high fantasy novel. Which
Probably.
yeah, that's fine. But if you look, I cannot find a lot of previous instances of Validus talking. More importantly, his weird little squishy nose is gone.
Again, all right. So I'm not sure that this is the real Validus.
Maybe this is actually a faux Validus.
It could be. I've always thought that maybe there were
Two Validi.
Maybe they were twins. Right? Isn't one of their lineage always have twins?
I see what you did there.
Anyway, we get to see who do we have? We have Colossal Boy and Superboy and Lightning Lad and Shrinking Violet and Brainiac 5 are all going on this mission to take down the Fatal Five in their Star Trek spaceship, which we get a fantastic. This is my favorite part of the issue. This sideways panel.
The cutaway view of the cruiser.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't, because you see the engines.
Yeah, they're really
but
tiny.
There's nowhere in the ship for the engines to be. The engines are just like a port on the back of the ship. And I'm like,
if you look,
I
think it's actually under the floor where Lightning Lad and who else? Superboy, Monel are at. Because if you look, there's some stairs that lead down, then through the neck of the ship to the bridge area. And so I'm thinking that underneath the floor is where the engines and everything are at.
Interesting. However, there is one thing about this that needs to be pointed out that I'm not sure if you caught, but I did.
The impulse engines?
No. Look in the neck of the ship.
Yes. We have Sunboy.
Where he's running down their galley, living quarters, human needs.
Yeah, like toilet. I think they mean a toilet.
That's the can, Stephen.
Yeah.
The Legion has a can. They have a restroom.
Everybody poops, Matthew.
Yeah, but the Legion, I mean, just knowing that the Legion poops, think about this.
I mean,
that's weird.
I didn't not assume that they didn't.
Have you ever seen a story where they do?
Not to mine. Well, there's always some stuff with Matter Eater Lad when he walks into the room and he's like, whoo, don't go in there. That's what I always assumed that was going on. He just ate something and he made a stinky. He made a doo-doo. Anyway, Superboy.
I think you're imagining issues that never happened.
Or did they? Superboy takes out the Emerald Eye by wrapping it up in his super cape. And even the Emerald Empress is like, oh no, my eyeball will get out. And he's like, yeah, not out of my super cape. And she's like, attack my android men. All these hunky men all oiled down that have been servicing her, catering to her every whim. And he's like, literally rips the arm off one of them. And as he's beating it, he's like, I must stop the Emerald Empress. But even I, as he's beating another android to death with another android arm, even I can't punch a woman.
Some of these androids are female. Oh, no. Really?
It's so funny. He eventually gives her whatever it's not a sleeper hold, but it's the one where you wrap your arms around somebody's body and you squeeze them enough to where they can't breathe and they pass out.
That's the bear hug, as popularized by George the Animal Steel.
Yeah, no, he totally does that to her, knocks her out. Validus is all upset because his rattle gets broken. We see each of the other members being taken down rather easily. You know, to be honest, Shrinking Violet punches the Persuader in the jaw, which we don't see enough Persuader stuff in the Legion. I think we get to see the others more than we see him. And I think that is because there's the slow phasing out of the fantasy element of the Legion. Everybody used to wear these weird Robin Hood costumes, about 10 years ago. And the Persuader definitely comes from that because he's kind of wearing a suit of armor and he's carrying around a battle axe. And I think we're starting to see the phase out of that. And maybe that's why he doesn't show up as much.
He'll be back.
He will be back. We also find out what Thayrock Johnson is doing. He's trying to make an android backup half of his body.
And he's trying to wrap it all in the perfectly normal looking rubber face masks material that is so prevalent in comics and issues of Get Smart. And I think that this issue kind of, for the first time, makes me feel bad a little bit for Dwayne Thayrock Johnson because, I mean, I'm not saying that I would kill somebody who destroyed my, rubber face mask half body, but you can kind of feel for him. You can feel like, oh my gosh, Brainiac comes out and says, we denied him his humanity. Wait, Superboy says that. But even so, the Legionnaires basically force him to live again as a freak after he accidentally melted half of his body.
Yep. Meanwhile, Duplicate Boy is not dead.
No, of course not.
Because while he's been in the recovery chamber, the oxygen tent, Saturn Girl comes in and says, "Oh, maybe I can mind meld with him and make his regenerative part of his body duplicate itself," or some mumbo jumbo.
Well, she actually uses his power to duplicate Superboy's recuperative and invulnerability powers, which is remarkably clever, I feel. It's actually a really solid move. There aren't any truly rock stupid moments plot-wise in this issue. It feels like everything kind of gels. Imra's thing makes sense. And earlier in the issue, very subtly, Duplicate Boy was like, "I shall duplicate the powers of Superboy."
Yeah.
Oh no, now I am hit in the back with an axe. It's a moment that makes sense. It's set up in the issue in a very subtle way, and I really, really like that.
Yeah, also really kind of set up subtly, we saw in the previous issue with Sunboy getting a little bit too interested in the makeout session on camera. Here, once Duplicate Boy is learned to be revived, Shrinking Violet is like, "Hooray, I get my boyfriend back." And then we see the long, slow Hulk walk of Colossal Boy as he walks away with his head hung low and Superboy staring after him going, "What's wrong with Colossal Boy? He never acted that way when he drank my coffee." and then we finally kind of get the connection that, he's kind of in love with her.
The big guy has a crush on the tiny girl, and he actually says to her, very sexist, "Easy, baby," when she punches out the Persuader. "You didn't think I'd let him hurt my little flower girl now, did you?"
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Creepy.
Jim.
Creepy.
Jim. I'm sorry, if it weren't for the fact that Colossal Boy has been established as kind of a big goober for whom that kind of lame pickup line might work I read it in a book that I bought in a bathroom vending machine kind of way.
Yeah.
I'd be mad about it, but it kind of works here. It's almost sweet. And she's like, "Oh, okay. Thank you, Jim."
I've just lost the person that I liked a great deal, and even though amid my mourning, you wanted to hit on me. That's so cute.
My boyfriend's dead, but it's sweet that you want me.
Also, just to give you guys a prelude to what's coming up in the next issue, it's a murder mystery where Duplicate Boy is found just dead in the middle of the street. And, everybody standing around is just like, we don't know what happened. How could he just be laid out flat like this with all of his innards just all over the sidewalk? And it isn't revealed until Superboy flies up above the scene and he's looking down. He goes, "Oh my gosh, Duplicate Boy is laying in a crater the shape of a giant footprint, which can only mean, dun, dun, dun." You're going to have to tune in next episode to find out what happened.
None of that is true, by the way. If you're listening right now and you come back for next episode, none of that is true.
It would actually make for an interesting story.
Would it, though? You just made Colossal Boy into a jealous murderer.
I mean, he's already going to be jealous. And I'm sure his jealousy is going to bubble up at some point in the near future.
He's not a murderer, and his jealousy doesn't bubble up until 83, and it does it in a way that you won't see coming. But again...
As he comes up behind her with one of those ether-filled Kleenexes?
No, there's no chlorophyll involved. Your jokes are bad, and you should
comes up behind her with a giant plant. "Have some chlorophyll, Shrinking Violet." We have come to the end of another Legion Clubhouse. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. Matthew, what did we learn in this episode?
We learned that if you miscolor Dream Girl pink, she looks exactly like Saturn Girl.
I think we also learn that having pent-up frustrations ultimately leads to racial tensions with every other race in the galaxy.
But we also learned that Brainiac's 12th level intellect allows him to properly do the dap handshake without any training.
Thank you so much for checking us out again this week. We will be back next time. And until then, I'm just a tad jealous, lad.
And I'm Kid.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2020 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.